I tried to switch using only Linux for 30 days and failed. But the reason isn't what you think it is. Oh, it's because you think I'm dumb? Alright, well, maybe a little bit. But I think it goes beyond a lack of skill and in some cases into areas where it flat out just does not work. Let's get into it. So this video isn't going to be a typical Windows or Mac OS versus Linux video. This is about my personal experience in switching from Windows and Mac OS to Linux. If you want to deep dive into the technical differences, there are plenty of videos out there. Now I've done a switching to Linux video about a year ago, but that was only for a week. This time I came in with the goal of doing it for an entire month. Before I get into any of the hardware and distro I chose, let me briefly explain my current daily use setup. My main workstation is a Windows 11 machine with an i9-13900K and an RTX 4090, and my daily driver laptop is an M1 MacBook Pro. Most of my real work is done on my workstation using Photoshop and DaVinci Resolve, and my main photo management and editing suite is Lightroom. I do occasionally do some light editing on my MacBook, but one thing I use a lot for my videos is Keynote for making graphics. Other than that, my use case is pretty standard. Visual Studio Code for some light dev work, Chrome for web browsing, and the only game I really play is League of Legends. Okay, so what hardware did I decide to go with? Well, last time I used a desktop system and that kind of sucked because I didn't really have a laptop for a week. So this time I went with a laptop as my main system. I chose a Dell XPS 15-9520 with an i7-12700H, 64 gigs of RAM, and an RTX 3050. From what I read, this machine handles Linux pretty well and the specs are more than enough to get stuff done. I'm well aware this is not as powerful as my workstation or as efficient as my MacBook, but I'm not going to use that as a factor here. Would it be more scientifically accurate to just install Linux on my workstation? Yeah, but last time I tried dual booting on my Windows machine, it was a pain in the ass, so I'm not dealing with that. Now for the most important question, which distro did you go with? Drumroll please. I went with the wrong one. That's right, it doesn't matter what I chose, people would still complain. Some of you are so passionate about the Linux distro that you use that you actively hate when people use other ones. Like, you're on the same team here. With that said, I went with Linux Mint. It seemed to have the best combination of beginner friendliness, stable and frequent updates, and a decent package manager. Alright, now go down in the comments and tell me that I'm wrong. Got that out of your system? Cool. Now I'm no stranger to Linux, so installing it and getting everything set up was never really a problem. And since I chose a machine that was Linux friendly, Mint had all of my drivers ready right out of the box. No complaints there. The first day or two, I basically just went through my main softwares to see what was working and what wasn't. I even had a little notepad for observations throughout the whole process. Right off the bat, you can see some issues I was facing. The first being monitor scaling. God forbid you have two monitors with different resolutions in Linux because you can't scale them independently. You have to pick between one having everything blown way up or the other one being super tiny. I'm using Xorg, and from what I've heard, Wayland may support independent scaling, but I've also heard that it's way more buggy. Maybe next year we'll try Wayland. Also, you can see I can't play League of Legends. Now, while some of you may argue that is a good thing, it's the only game I play and it just won't run on Linux now due to their new anti-cheat program that runs at the kernel level. Something else that would be a common theme that I discovered in the first few days is that you have to do actual research when you buy a piece of hardware. I have an Insta360 webcam and their software to control the position and visual settings doesn't exist for Linux. This is never a problem in Windows or Mac OS because you just assume the software will be supported, and 99% of the time you're right. Luckily, the default position is stored on the device, so that was already set, but I couldn't change it. And here's the famous clip of when I used it for my live stream with Tom Lawrence.
Integrity and redo it, even if it requires script.
Oh no.
Your
Oh
camera-
no. Oh no. Linux. Linux, what are you doing? What is happening?
This is the Linux experience. This embodies exactly how his Linux transition is going.
Okay, hold on. So
what camera do you have?
The Insta360.
Okay, that's what.
Something. Oh no.
Neat stuff, right? Then when I do recordings with OBS, there would be no problem with the normal playback, but when I'd import it into DaVinci Resolve, there would be no audio. Apparently, AAC isn't supported in Resolve for Linux. AAC isn't supported? So I had to change the audio encoder to something different, and I can't really show you. Oh, actually, maybe I can show you. Okay. So I had to change it to Opus audio encoder. And when I did that, I had audio in my recordings, I had audio in DaVinci, and we were good. After messing with the audio settings, I got it to work, but still kind of annoying. Luckily, Resolve is natively supported and works pretty well for the most part. Although the UI is super tiny on a 4K screen, and apparently there is no minimize button, so that's fun. Over the next few days, things were going alright. My webcam just stopped working though, so I tried to fix that. Okay, so instead of putting like 6 seconds worth of effort into fixing my webcam, I went on Amazon.com and ordered a C922X Logitech Pro Streamer 1080p webcam. I set it up because I figured it would be just fine, but this is what it looks like. That is terrible. So obviously we had to get our Insta360 webcam working, and I did what any good IT person would do and unplug it and plug it back in, except into the dock and not the dock that's connected to the dock. And voila, we have a pretty solid webcam, especially compared to this crap. About a week in is when things started to go downhill, because this time around I didn't want to just survive the Linux challenge. I wanted to really learn the ins and outs of Linux. What's a kernel? How do package managers work? What's the actual difference between distros? It sounds good and all, but when you're forcing yourself into this while also slowing down your existing workflows and not being able to use specific softwares, it gets frustrating very quickly. I am fully aware this is a me problem and not a problem everyone will face, but when you're trying to make a video and need every little thing to be recorded and screen captured, it kind of sucks, to be honest. Now, I mentioned before a few main pieces of software that I use heavily just won't work on Linux, and those being Photoshop, Lightroom, and League of Legends. Each one of these has various levels of flexibility. For League of Legends, there isn't really an alternative. Yes, I realize there's other MOBAs, but for the actual game, there's not. For Lightroom Classic, which is what I use to organize all my photos and do some editing, there are a few, but they're either equally as expensive or also just don't run on Linux. Photoshop, though, I do think this one can be swapped out pretty easily. I went with Photopea, which is a browser-based alternative that actually lets you import whole-ass Photoshop files. It doesn't run as smoothly as Photoshop, but unless you have a massive project, it's extremely usable with hardly any learning curve. Another real-world use case I ran into is that when I bring my laptop out in the world, I usually VPN back into my home network with WireGuard, but apparently there isn't a WireGuard GUI for Linux. So instead, I just wrote a little script to check if the WireGuard connection is active and toggle it accordingly. It's not very sophisticated, but it worked well enough to where I could look down at the taskbar to see if I was connected or not, then double-click my script to connect or disconnect. If you're not comfortable with writing code, this could be a problem. I'm aware it's not complex, but this is the kind of stuff regular users just aren't going to do. Going into the second week, I had noticed some smaller things, one good and one bad. First is that Chrome would just bug out and start shaking when there was a prompt on the screen. Not a deal breaker, but certainly annoying. A surprisingly good thing was the battery life on the Dell was actually really good, maybe even better than Windows. It may have something to do with the NVIDIA Hybrid on-demand mode. I guess I haven't mentioned it yet, but during this time I had been using my Thunderbolt dock to connect my laptop to my monitors. To be honest, this wasn't great, since probably half of the time it didn't work and required me to unplug it, open the laptop, let the screen readjust, and then try again. The dock I was using had 1 gig networking, which is fine, but I'm used to editing over the network on my 100 gig connection. And while this is completely overkill, I still wanted to try getting 10 gig working, so I used my little Thunderbolt PCIe adapter with an Asus 10 gig card. I then decided I wanted to try to see if a GPU would work, because that would be kind of cool. Here's the clip of me explaining it. Yeah, at some point my OBS settings got reverted, so that whole thing had no audio. These are all things that just don't happen to me on Windows. And I can feel you guys rolling your eyes at me through the screen, but it's true. I have no allegiance to Windows. I'm not going to simp for $1 trillion company, but my stuff just works on there. If it didn't, I would have switched to Mac OS. And if that sucked too, I would just become Amish or something. At this point, all of these things had built up, from the big issues to the small things, and on top of me trying to shove a camera in my face throughout the whole process, I just gave up. 21 days in, I was editing a video that needed graphics, and when I realized I didn't have Keynote, I just got my MacBook out to get the job done, thus ending the challenge. So now it's time for reflection. The overall question I think needs to be answered is Linux on the desktop bad? No, I don't think it's bad. I just think it's bad for me. I know plenty of people that daily drive Linux and enjoy it. They wouldn't do it if it was bad, but they have different use cases and use different softwares than I do, so it works for them. You can say that I'm lazy, that's fine. But here's the thing about being lazy. A lot of people use their computers as a tool to create something or complete a task. People want their tools to just work since the actual task they're trying to accomplish is the main goal, not getting the tool to work. Imagine if using a hammer was like this. Hey, you should use this Linux hammer. No, I think I'm gonna go with this Windows hammer. Come on, man, this thing's so much better. That thing sucks. I mean, what is that guy even doing? Okay, is it like easier to use or something? No, this thing takes years to learn how to use properly, and I'm gonna make fun of you the entire time. That sounds awful. Now, but once you try it, you're gonna love it. Come on, try it. Okay. Whoa, what are you doing? I'm hitting the nail. Are you dumb? It doesn't work with those nails. You have to forge the nails yourself. Yeah, I don't want to do that. Wow, okay, look at this guy. Hey, you want to try this Linux hammer? Yeah. Ew, gross. Not that one. What is going on? Oh my God! Now I'm about to blow your minds here. You ready? When switching to Linux, you don't have to completely give up other operating systems. Crazy, right? And that's the problem I think you see with all of these I switched to Linux videos on YouTube. They're not practical. Nobody is going to kick down your door and run in threatening you saying you can only use Linux. I mean, Linux users would be out of breath before even getting to your door. With that said, I will be doing a part 3 to this saga, but it won't be switching to Linux. It'll be integrating Linux into my existing workflow. Will that make for a less clickbaity video? Probably, but I think it's much more applicable to those out there looking to make the switch. Well, that's all I have. I tried to keep this relatively short because there are certainly lots of things I have to say regarding why I think Linux has these problems, the community itself, and future expectations. But I think you guys have heard me bitch and moan enough for one day. Let me know down in the comments what you think. I have thick skin, so don't worry, but just do me a favor real quick. Type your comment, then think about if you're propagating the stereotypical Linux user, then think about why newcomers have such a hard time. If you like this video, then drop a like. If you are excited to see my part 3 of trying Linux, then make sure you're subscribed so you can check that out when I make it. Eventually. I want to give a huge shout out to my YouTube members and my Patreons. You guys are my Linux distro that works flawlessly with all of my software and has no hardware compatibility issues at all. Wait, that doesn't exist. But if you're still watching, you're Temple OS. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one.